Hi there, this is Unmesh from PiXimperfect and I've been a beta tester for both Photoshop and Luminar. Now recently Luminar shared a sneak peek of a new feature coming just this month, the Sky AI 2.0. Now it claims to be a completely revolutionary AI technology for replacing skies, with the highlight being that it can also create reflections as it replaces those skies. What a great time for this update, because just a few months ago, Photoshop released its new automatic sky replacement feature back at Adobe Max. So in this video, we are going to go head to head to see which technology is better, Luminar Sky AI or Photoshop Sky Replacement. There can be cases where Photoshop is better and situations in which Luminar is better. Either way, it's fight worthy. So without any further ado, let's get started. Back in the magical world of Photoshop versus Luminar, and before we begin, if you are interested in checking out Luminar or Photoshop, I have links to both in the description. Also, we have some PiXimperfect exclusive offers for Luminar with lots of free bonus skies and discounts, which I'll share at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Now let's talk about 12 different scenarios in which Photoshop and Luminar can compete, starting with the biggest addition to the update, that is sky replacement with reflection. Starting out with our very first example on Luminar AI, and as you can clearly see, the UI has got a much better upgrade. It looks way much more modern. Everything is so easy to access. As you can see on the right hand side, everything now is on a list instead of different sections. So right now, just get straight to sky replacement with our very first example. So click on Sky AI, that's all you got to do. And right now you can see sky previews. We'll get to that later. Choose any of the sky that you like. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit to make it clearer for us. And maybe choose one of these skies. Let's choose this one. Have a look at the reflection it creates. Cannot see the reflection? No problem. There you go. Inside the reflection section, you can just increase it a little bit. You'll be able to see all the colors come down. Still cannot see it? No problem. Trust me, it's there. If you have a look at the before, see, have a look at the after, look at the light created by the sky. Isn't that pretty cool? We just need to bump up the scene relighting a little bit. Let's go all the way. And if you want a little more color into it, just increase relight saturation. And there you have it. Look at the reflection. It's so cool, isn't it? So here's the before. And here is the after. Look at the reflection. Still cannot believe it. Let me move the sky and reflection will move with it. So if you go to orientation and try to move the sky a little bit, see the reflection is moving with that. It's so darn amazing, isn't it? Now we will look at more Luminar reflection examples later, but understand that on the flip side, there is no such thing in Photoshop's sky replacement. Let's try to do the same thing with the Photoshop sky replacement, same sky, same image. Let's go to edit and then sky replacement. Now inside of sky replacement, we need to choose our own sky that we used in Luminar. So click on the drop down right over there. Click on the plus. Let us locate the sky. The one that we were using was Sunset Clouds 2. Click on open. So there you have it, my friend. As you can see, there is no reflection right over there. Also, the edges look crazy with halos. If you even look at the Luminar's default result, it's much better. Have a look at the Photoshop's result. It's so dull, the edges look weird. I understand that you can just decrease fade edge and kind of fix it a little bit. It still doesn't look that realistic, and by default, the values of Luminar are much better. You can do some lighting adjustments, some color adjustments here as well, but still you don't get that reflection. Moving on to situation number 2, and now it is time for us to talk about the relighting features in both the technologies. Starting with Luminar, let's first of all replace the sky here and then talk about relighting. Now relighting is a feature in which you adjust the lighting and the color of the image based on the new sky. So let's give it a new sky by going to Sky AI and choose one of these skies. Let's go with this one. It looks amazing. If you just leave it right here, it'll be perfect. Now let's talk about our relighting features that we have over here. Now inside the scene relighting section is where you'll find the relighting sliders. So first of all, let's increase the strength to absolutely match the colors. Now you can also relight the human based on it. Now this is a great slider which Photoshop lacks, the relighting saturation. It controls the saturation and the intensity of the color coming from the new sky. So I'm just going to go all the way to the right and have a look at the change right here in the water. Can you see it? So here's the before, no relight saturation, and here is the after. Just look at the color right over there. Now on top of that, definitely you can just increase the reflection amount and have a look at the reflection. You don't even have to do a thing. It looks perfect. If you just look at the entire scene, you would notice that the sky corresponds to the reflection. and the relighting as well. So as you change the position of the sky, so if I change the vertical offset or even the horizontal offset, you will notice that as I change it, the reflection and the lighting changes as well. Now let's attempt to do the same thing in Photoshop. Again, we're going to go to Edit and then Sky Replacement. In here, we're going to choose the same sky. Click on the drop down. It's going to take a little while. Click on plus. And now we're going to choose the same sky, which was Red Sunrise 01. Now have a look at this result. It doesn't look bad though. Let's look at the relighting features over here. So in here, you just have two blend modes, multiply and screen, and lighting adjustment and the color adjustment. That's it. No relighting humans separately, no saturation, none of that. But if they work good, it should be enough, right? Let's just increase the lighting adjustment all the way to the right hand side. And let's also adjust the color all the way to the right. But it's just a flat treatment. It's just doing nothing. And if I try to move the sky, if I move it left or right, it changes just a little bit. Not much of a change, and you don't see any noticeable change. Of course, you might see a little bit change here and there, but it's not making a major change. It's just a flat adjustment on top of that. Now compare this with Luminar AI and have a look. It's a completely different game here. If you change something, if you make it right or left, the whole thing and the whole relighting changes. If there's more light, there's going to be more light in the picture. If there's less light, the picture is going to get darker. Now here's another interesting observation. If you play with the lighting adjustment, notice just this area around the edge, just this area gets affected. If you take it all the way to the right, just this area becomes darker. That's what it's doing. If you choose screen, that area will become brighter. If you take it all the way to the left, it'll make it less brighter. What about all of these areas which are further away from the edge? It just doesn't consider it at all. Now, as we learn when it comes to reflection and relighting features, Luminar is way ahead. But now let's talk about something which Photoshop has been a champion of lately, and that is masking. So coming to situation number 3, let's talk about which technology does a better job of creating a mask, or in other words, refining it. So let's select a fancy sky for this one. Now as you can see, even the default results are amazing. Now I feel the image has to be a little darker to go with the sky because this is a sunrise or a sunset sky. But there's too much light in the image. Now definitely we'll go down and just increase relight strength right over here. But what is also required is that we go up and in the light section, we just decrease the exposure just a little bit. Now have a look, the way it decreases exposure, it's not like Photoshop or Camera Raw. It is a little different. Even if you go all the way to the left, it doesn't make the image absolutely black. It just makes it darker in a very smart way. In other application, it would just make it black if you get it too far. Anyway, we're going to keep it at this value and already it's looking pretty good, but the trees are not looking right. So let's zoom in right over there and see what's up. Look at how complicated these trees are. The easiest way to fix this is by going again back to the sky section, and in here, in the mask refinement, all you have to do is to play with these 3 sliders. Global is just like shift edge in Photoshop. How much you want the sky to seep in. So if you want the sky to seep in a little more, you can try to increase it. But in this example, I feel it's perfect. But the sky does need to dig down a little bit, change the horizon. So let's go up and just decrease vertical offset so that it just goes in. All right, it goes in fully. Now about the skies, let's try fix details and close gaps. We need to fix the small details. Let's increase it. It fixes it just a little bit and play with close gaps. Now, as soon as you do that, you will see the change right over there. Have a look. All of these details are now fixed. If we zoom in, I can show this to you. So before making these changes, as you can notice, the edges just don't look right. Just when you increase close gaps, have a look at these areas. All branches show up. Play with fixed details to fix the little details in masking. And now let's zoom out and have a look. Everything looks perfect. Now on top of that, definitely I would want a little more reflection. So let's come down and increase the reflection amount and have a look. Isn't that pretty darn amazing? You didn't even have to worry about a thing. In Photoshop, if you want to create a reflection, you might have to flip the entire image and then apply sky replacement, then flip it back. You won't have the ripples and the texture and the sense of it being a reflection, because when it comes to reflection, have a look, the angle is different. It's not a complete plain mirror image of the sky. There's a little bit color change. It's a little bit darker. Photoshop does not consider that. And the best part is, and I do this all the time, after you add the sky, always try horizontal offset. And as you do, have a look at the reflection. Have a look at how it changes. See? it completely changes the entire mood of the image. Let's do the same thing in Photoshop and compare just the masking. Now that I've added the sky, this is the default result. Now as you can see, we definitely need a fix right here. So for masking, there are just a few sliders in Photoshop. One of them is definitely fade edge. It simply blurs the edge. That's what it does in the mask. And if you ask me personally, it's kind of trying to hide when it's probably not making a good mask. But in many cases, Photoshop does create a good mask. Let's try to decrease it and see the real masking. As you can see, it is doing pretty good. Now, let's try shift edge. It's one more. This controls how much it seeps in. So as you can see, it doesn't seep into the tree very well. So you would increase that even more. This is too much. It eats into the tree too much. So let's set it in the middle, maybe a little bit to the left. Now let's just increase the lighting adjustment to fix it. So this is the mask you get with Photoshop, and that's all we have. Now if you compare it with Luminar, it's so much more cleaner in here. As you can see with Photoshop, the sky doesn't completely get in. If you try to increase shift edge and make the sky go into that, it eats up into the tree. Even I tried a little lower value. Even if you choose 18, have a look. It eats into it and it just doesn't look right. Whereas in Luminar, as you can see, everything is so tack sharp. Now you must be telling me, Unmesh, you're very biased. You're not darkening the whole image in Photoshop. Well, let's do that too. Let's try that too. Let's choose a shift edge of 5 or let's go for 10. All right. Let's set it the way it is. Now let's try to darken it. Let's add a curves adjustment layer. Why curves? Let's choose exposure. We want the competition to be unbiased. So let's choose exposure and just decrease the exposure and see if it fixes that. Well, it kind of doesn't fix it well because if you try to darken it, even the sections inside the trees get darkened and discolored very poorly. Have a look at Luminar. It's so cool. So here is a zoomed out result. This is with Photoshop and this one is with Luminar. It's just clear, man. It's just clear which one is the winner here. Now coming to feature number 4, one of the biggest advantages Photoshop's brand new sky replacement feature had early on was sky previews. So when you had to replace a sky by going to edit and then sky replacement, you had the preview of what sky you're replacing it with. You could go inside of folders, choose whatever sky you like, and you could see the preview. Luminar back then did not have this feature. But right now, if you go to Luminar, you would notice that it does have all the previews in here as well. And in here as well, you have blue sky, bright blue sky, choose whatever category you want, and you will have the skies from that category. So in this case, both have sky previews, both are equally matched. Coming to feature number 5, and this is a big one, and that is horizontal and vertical movement of the sky. Now, both technologies treat it differently. Let's see how they differ. Back in Luminar, let's give this New York City skyline a sky. So let's go with this one. We're going to choose a very dramatic sky. Now it doesn't look like it's matching because the ongoing image is very bright. We need to darken it just a little bit. So let's go to light section right over there. Again, we're going to do the same thing. Let's decrease the exposure a little bit. And just as you do that, it begins to match so darn well. Now let's come down again. We need to increase the relighting strength to relight it beautifully according to the sky. And as you can see, it's going pretty great. Now, as you can see, this area looks a little less saturated. Let's increase relight saturation. See, it fixes that. And also, we're going to go up and bring the sky down by taking vertical offset a little bit down, just like that. Pretty good. Now, here's a great challenge. What if I want to move the sky horizontally? What happens when I do that? Have a look. When I horizontally move the sky, see, it looks like there's a time lapse going on. But actually what's happening is, as it touches the edge of the actual sky, and if I try to move it a little more, Luminar knows that we don't want any gap in there, so it automatically resizes the sky to compensate for it. If you move it to the left, it goes, and when it hits the limit, Luminar starts to resize to compensate for it. I think that's genius, and that's how it should be. Whereas it's not the same with Photoshop. Let's try to do that there. Now, as you can see, I've chosen the same sky here in Photoshop. If I change the lighting adjustment and the color adjustment, maybe it will look a little better because it's not at the moment. Now, I wanted to make some adjustments and make the foreground a little darker, but I cannot do that because I have to let go of the sky replacement dialog box, again create an exposure layer. And here's the not so good news. There is no way in Photoshop at the moment that you can get back to the sky replacement dialog box after applying it. We'll talk more about that later, but at the moment, if you try to move the sky a little bit to the right, it goes pretty nice, but after it hits the limit, it still goes, and it creates that gap. If you bring the sky down, you see that edge. You see that edge here too, and it's crazy. Like, if you want to move the sky just like this, you would have to move it first and then maybe scale it a little bit, make it a little larger. Whoa. It takes a little time as well, and then adjust it. It's very, very inconvenient. Whereas in Luminar, even if you're doing vertical movement, so let's try to do vertical offset and try to bring it down. You don't see anything. You don't see that edge. Luminar resizes the sky to compensate for it. Now it's up to you as to what you want. In my opinion, I don't need any edges, and this one makes more sense to me. Moving on to situation number 6, and this is one of those little situations where you have to rotate the sky a little bit. So in this case, first of all, let's give it a simple blue sky. So in the blue sky category, let's go for the third one right over there. And it looks good by default. I would make the sky a little brighter by going into sky adjustments and just increase the brightness right over there. We can also increase the atmospheric haze. We'll talk about that later, but for right now, just increase it a little bit. Now let's say you want to rotate the sky. How easy it is to do that in Luminar? Well, just go up. If you want to rotate it clockwise, just rotate it clockwise. And Luminar automatically compensates for it by resizing it. If you want to rotate it anti-clockwise, go to the left. But I'm going to go to the right, and there you have it. However, when you try to rotate in Photoshop, it's a completely different story. All right, now that the sky is loaded, there is no slider right here to rotate it. It's just not possible. The only way you can rotate it is by applying it. Now, after you apply it, if you try to directly rotate it, it won't work. Even the adjustments will rotate along with that. So if I rotate it, you'll notice that the foreground lighting also rotates with it. So there's a problem here. Let's go back. First of all, we need to unlink these layers by right-clicking on it and choosing Unlink Layers right over there. And then press Ctrl or Command T, then rotate it. Then you have to resize it. See, in Luminar, you wouldn't have to worry about these edges because it was resizing to compensate for it. But right here, you need to resize it, find a happy place so that there are no edges, and go with it. So when it comes to rotation, it's way easier to do in Luminar by just one slider, and it's inside of Sky section. However, if you're looking for more manual control, trying to squeeze the sky or stretch it or have the complete control of the transform, well, in that case, Photoshop is a better choice. Let's talk about a situation where Photoshop is the clear winner, but we'll still see how Luminar competes, and that is manual masking correction. See, when you replace a sky, AI is great. It might get your job done perfectly, even 99% of the time. But there are some times where you do need that manual adjustment. How does Luminar tackle it? Let's see. Photoshop is a master of this. We're going to do the same thing in Photoshop and see how it compares. So here we have another image. Let's give it a nice sky. Just even the default looks amazing. Now we do want to bring the sky a little down just right here. Now as we do that, have a look, there's a little bit of the sky seeping through right in here, right? Now, first of all, let me just go down and just relight it just a bit and increase relight saturation to make it look a little more interesting. Already it's looking pretty good, but we sure do need to make some adjustments here. So how do we erase that? Well, it comes with a mask. Yes, it does. So you can click on this button, add mask, and I want to erase it, right? So choose the eraser. You can make the brush a little smaller, the eraser a little smaller, and simply erase this area. That's all you gotta do. Now you can make the eraser a little bit softer right over here. And if you want to add back in certain areas, click the paint brush and just add back these areas. Pretty good. You're back in shape. Now click on that one again to let go of the mask. And there you have it. You have that area fixed. Now there are some gaps in here we want to add to that. You can go back to the mask with the help of the brush. You can just paint that back in. No big deal. All right, now we have that fixed, and that's how you do it in Luminar. Now it looks perfect. Now in most cases, actually even 99% of the cases, you can leave it at that. You can make little changes with the color and the lighting here and there, like relighting strength. And maybe we need to reduce the reflection amount. We don't want any reflection over here. and leave it at that. However, if you wish to go a little more extreme, like introducing atmospheric haze or adding grain or whatever there is, I'm going to go a little more extreme with that. You will notice that it doesn't work on that area. Any slider in here doesn't work on that area because that is masked out. That is one little drawback that a Luminar has. However, with Photoshop, everything is manual, so you don't have to worry about a thing. Back here in Photoshop, and I apply the same sky right here. Let's move it a little up, just like this, and agree with it. Hit enter or OK. Now in the mask, you have the ability to go in here, take the brush and erase certain areas. Make the brush a little larger and just erase it from here, or add back in certain areas. Although it doesn't have many sliders for adjustment, you still have access to everything because Photoshop is absolutely manual. You have 101% control over everything. Now it's one of those situations where Photoshop clearly wins. Now for these situations is when you need to work with Luminar and Photoshop together. Luminar is a great software. It doesn't have to compete with Photoshop. I actually use it with Photoshop. We'll talk about that later. But when it comes to manual, well, that's why Photoshop exists in the first place. Coming to feature number 8, now let's talk about human-aware lighting. What is this? Well, let's give it some sky first. We can actually choose the same sky for her. And also, as you can see, the light in this image is coming from the left, and in the sky, it's coming from the right. So you might want to flip that. Just click on flip. Now, definitely, we have to make it a little darker. Increase horizon blending to blend the horizon more smoothly, and let's relight it. We need a little bit definitely of saturation. Looks pretty cool. Now here's the part that I was talking about. When you add a new sky, how much of the new sky you want to match with that of the subject? You have separate control for it. So you can relight the subject separately. So Luminar detects what the subject is and you can control the lighting there. If you have a look at the color of the hat, it's not matching with that of the sky. The subject overall is not matching that much. However, if you just increase relight human, it begins to match more and more. All the way to the right, it matches perfectly. Now sure, it has become a little darker. No problem, we can add a little face light. So if you go to portrait adjustments here, just go to face AI, add a little bit of face light. There you have it. Beautiful, isn't it? Now Photoshop does not have any slider called relight human or subject aware lighting. It just applies a flat adjustment. If you want to do this in Photoshop, you would have to separately make a selection of the subject, create a mask and add adjustment layers and actually do it manually. It's so much simpler and much better here. Now there's something wrong with this image, something clearly wrong. Can you tell what that is? And that brings us to situation number 9. When you want to replace a sky, it's not always necessary that the sky is in focus. It might be out of focus, like in this case, as you can see, the focus is on the subject and the background is completely out of focus. However, when we replace a sky, it cannot be in focus. So for that, there is a defocus slider. So you need to increase that to match the sky with that of the depth of field. And it makes sense. However, in Photoshop, when you replace a sky, there is no option to defocus it right here. You would have to manually do it later with Gaussian blur or any other kind of blur, but that option is not built in into sky replacement dialog box. Coming to situation number 10, and that is grain and noise. If you have a closer look at this photo, there's a lot of beautiful grain in there, right? If you add a new sky here, let's go to edit. Let me quickly do that for you. So as you can see, I have added a new sky here. Now there is grain and noise on the subject and the foreground. But on the new sky, there's none of that. Plus, I've defocused it a little bit. And it doesn't match up pretty well. See, there is noise right over there, and just beyond this line, there's none of it. So we need to match it. And for that, you already have an easy slider to fix it. And that is grain. Just increase it and have a look. The grain of the sky matches with that of the original image. If it doesn't look like too much, you can always increase it. That's it. Again, on the flip side, in Photoshop, there is no feature inbuilt in the sky replacement dialog box to add noise to match it with that of the image. Coming to feature number 11, what if I could tell you that we could add 3-dimensional atmospheric haze? Wouldn't that be pretty cool? Now, when you replace a sky, it can be highly contrasty and might not just look right when there's a lot of haze in the picture. So you might want to add haze to be able to make it realistic. And not just a simple plain haze. What if you could add haze in layers? Like for the further objects, more haze, and for the objects closer to the camera, less haze? Is it possible? Well, with Luminar it is. So for this example, let's first of all give it a sky. Now you can take all the time in the world to kind of adjust the masking by increasing close gaps and fix details and work with all of that. And even the reflection is right here. It's looking pretty good. You can just relight it a little bit, increase the reflection amount. As you can see, the reflection is coming on very nicely. Even if it's a wet road, Luminar recognized it and it's coming on pretty cool. Now, if you have a closer look at the trees and on the sky, something just doesn't fit right, because in the original image, there's a lot of mist, there's a lot of haze. We need to recreate that. And for that, we have this feature called Atmospheric Haze. If you increase it all the way to the right, you will notice a very crazy and interesting thing. For the further away areas, there is more haze, and for the areas which are closer, you have less haze. Isn't that just out of this world? Now, right now, it looks pretty interesting. Now, overall, you can go to light, and I would just decrease the overall exposure for it to look good. Now, on top of it, of course, you can just apply some lookup tables to make it absolutely interesting. But that's the haze, my friend. Now, Photoshop's neural filter has a haze feature, but that's not built in inside the sky replacement dialog box. We'll try that as well. Let's see how it competes. So for the same image in Photoshop, we'll choose the same sky. We'll do some lighting and color adjustment right here. Now, just apply it. And it did a pretty good job, actually. I have to admit that. But it didn't create the reflection. I missed that as well. Either way, let's try the atmospheric haze. So first of all, create a stamp visible layer, go to filter and then neural filters. Now inside of that, click on this button for beta filters. Let's scroll down and here you will find depth aware haze. Let's turn it on and just increase the haze. Let's see what happens. Well, it looks pretty good, but the edges are not very satisfactory. If we hit OK, I can show that to you. It's pretty okay, but have a look at these edges. It's just not looking right. Look over here. It did a very poor job. It looks okay, maybe you can work with it, but have a look at Luminar's work. It's just so clean and nice. Moving on to the final feature for head-to-head, and that is importing multiple skies. Right now with Photoshop, there is no way you can import multiple skies into it. You have to import it one by one. Adobe might add this feature later, but let's say you downloaded some sky packs from the internet and you want all of those skies in one folder inside of Photoshop Sky Replacement. There is no way you can do that all at once. You would have to import them one by one. However, in Luminar, you now have the feature to do that. All you have to do is to click on the sky drop-down and click on the group drop-down again and choose Show Custom Skies. It will open up the folder with custom skies that you have added. Now, all you have to do is to just copy and paste all of the skies you want to see in Luminar right here. And Luminar will simply load up all of those skies. Doesn't sound like much, but it's a very convenient feature. Now, let me share with you a bonus reason why at this moment, the sky replacement in Photoshop is completely obliterated by Luminar. And that is this. When you apply sky replacement in Photoshop, and you have already applied it, there is no way you can go back and have access to those sliders that you had when you were working with the sky replacement dialog box. Sliders like shift edge, color adjustment, lighting adjustment. Yes, you can work with adjustment layers and set that manually, but there's no way you're getting back access to the choice of skies and the other features right over there. However, in Luminar, you always have those sliders. You always have those choices of skies. And that is where Luminar excels. So what do I think about it? Well, except for little manual adjustments like manual masking, Luminar performs better than Photoshop clearly when it comes to sky replacement. I personally don't treat it as a competition to Photoshop. Instead, why not use the best of both worlds? Yes, you can use Luminar as a Photoshop plugin, and that too non-destructively with Smart Object. Anytime you feel you need Photoshop's assistance to manually make a little change here and there, you can always do that. Now, if you're interested in Luminar, I have some amazing offers for you. Click the link in the description to get Luminar AI along with 50 high-res skies as free bonuses. On top of these bonuses, use the code PiXimperfect10 at checkout to get an additional $10 off. I hope you enjoyed this fun video. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.